Hi, Alexis. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. I'm here at Stradbroke actually, where our retreat's going to be in March.
Oh, yeah. How beautiful.
Thank you. And where are you as well?
I always seem to be in a different place for these Facebook live streams. I'm in
Mhm.
my bedroom right now because my bedroom is air conditioned.
Lush, yes.
Yeah. And all my family is out. So I'm home alone and comfortable on my bed in the air conditioning.
Perfect place to talk about the drama triangle. Uh,
The- so some human dramas happen either in the bedroom or in the household, right? Quite a lot of the time, actually.
yes, so this is a topic that's quite new to me, but I love that you've brought it to our attention because since you've raised it in my awareness, I'm seeing it left, right, and centre.
Ah,
Uh, the drama triangle. Would you tell us a little bit about it and who the central players are, please?
yeah, absolutely. I will. I just am going to bear with me and my black dog for just a moment.
We will. We will. Hello, Black Dog.
I'm, this black dog lives in my bedroom as a symbol for, hard things, sadness, depression, struggles, because I'm reminded that we must hold our struggles like a vulnerable puppy very tenderly. I'm saying that while I wait for the live stream to come up on my phone because I don't want to miss any comments or questions people might have.
Yes, we do love your engagement. Please do drop us a line anytime something comes to mind, whether it is something that's playing out in your life or any burning questions that come up. Yes, spill it out because we will attend to you every so often. We will take a pause and pick up your comments and then continue the conversation.
Exactly, exactly. So today we're going to talk about the drama of human relationships, and in particular, Dr. Karpman's model from a couple of decades ago now of the drama triangle. So there's many models or ways to understand conflict, and I'm familiar with quite a few, but I've chosen this one because in more extreme, but not only extreme, situations of interpersonal, I guess, drama or conflict, we see that people take different roles. And in the drama triangle, we see three roles. So if you haven't already looked at our blog post or my blog post on this topic, I'm going to post it into the comments because it's really, really good to have a visual. The first role I'll speak about is the role of the victim. So the victim is, now I'm going to see if I can do this, put it in the comments while I'm talking to you. There we go. How clever am I? I did it. So if people want to take a look in the comments of the video, I've just put that in there and you can open it in a new tab and have a look at the visual. So the victim is the one who feels, it's all of us, by the way, all of us have experienced to some degree these three archetypal roles. So when we feel like we've been victimized, and maybe we have been a victim legitimately, maybe we've been treated very badly, we feel powerless, we feel helpless, and a natural impulse for humans is to seek help and find a way to empower ourselves, often through the support of another person. So this is very natural to do this. We get stuck in the victim role, though, when we feel sorry for ourselves or when we see ourselves as completely innocent. Now, sometimes we are, but other times we're not, but we still slip into the victim role and we feel oppressed, ostracized, we feel indignant. And as I said, we feel powerless, and we might use those feelings to guilt trip the person we perceive as the persecutor, the one who we think is in the wrong, and we look for a rescuer. So these are the three roles: the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. And I've seen it in my clients' lives over and over again, subtly and not so subtly. And sometimes I've met clients who sort of stay with an abiding sense of victimhood. They feel hard done by. And I can always have empathy for that and understand it because perhaps in earlier times, they really were a victim. But unfortunately, when we stay stuck in a sense of victimhood and feel like we are right and blameless and everybody else is to blame, we end up giving away our power and we forget that we can take action. Don't conclude that you're powerless, because that's almost never true. We never don't have choice. So the victim role is when we try to find power in our belief that we're blameless and we're in the right. Now, if you've ever been in the other position where you feel really angry and a sort of inflated sense of your own righteousness, and you become a bit controlling, a bit rigid, overly critical, then you might be stepping into the persecutor role. And the persecutor feels empowered through their judgments. They are right, and they're going to let everybody know. And then the rescuer might come in. The rescuer is like the white knight who takes the side of the perceived victim and tries to help them solve their problems. Now, at first, this could be, just a very compassionate thing to do, to, step in and help somebody, give them somewhere to live, give them a job, give them a lot of support. But if we're not careful, and this has happened to a lot of us, we can get a little bit stuck in that role. We can feel powerful through being a bit of a hero and feeling needed. And then the victim becomes dependent on the rescuer. And then they stay in their disempowered position. Now, if any of us have played the rescuer role, and I know I have, it could stem from anxiety or fear of loneliness or weak spots in our self-esteem. And so, these, what I really wanted to say is these are actually fairly universal archetypes. This happens across cultures. This has happened across the centuries. And the other point that I really wanted to make up front is that conflict in human relationships is not only normal and common, but it's actually grist for the mill. It's really useful. I couldn't even imagine a human world where there was no conflict, because I don't know how we would grow and learn and develop as people.
Awesome introduction. Thank you. As you're talking about the victim, I'm thinking about the dependence schema. And as you're talking about the rescuer, I'm thinking about a number of parents I know that seem to perpetuate a dependence from their children as a sense of needing to be needed.
And exactly. And also fear of the pain. What's coming to my mind now is the scene from Finding Nemo, where Dory and the father fish are stuck in the whale's belly. And the father says to Dory, "But I never wanted anything to happen to him." He's trying to rescue his son quite legitimately. And Dory says, "That's a strange thing to want. If you never want anything to happen to him, nothing will ever happen to him."
Yeah, that's right. I think, a parental role is by nature something of a rescuer, but as you say, so what I'm hearing is that it's not so much a problem with taking on these roles. That's natural, it's bound to happen, but it's getting stuck in one of those three positions that might lead to difficulty. Is that fair to say?
That is absolutely the case. Thank you. Yes. And, I hope that our listeners have maybe read the blog post that I've just shared in the comments, because it's a worthwhile reflection to consider, do I tend to slip into one of these roles in my family situation, or with my children, or with my friends, or at work? I have seen this dynamic played out in workplaces many times, in teams, because one of the other things I do besides clinical psychology is I'm a mediator in workplaces. And so this drama triangle has really helped me understand certain conflicts in organizations as well. And people do get stuck. They really identify as the victim or as the rescuer. And it's worthwhile kind of considering whether it's true power, whether you're in your true power, or kind of a false sense of power through playing that role.
Would you have an example for us, Rachel?
Oh my goodness.
Help to demonstrate the difference between the true and the false power.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at the comments that are already coming through thick and fast.
Beautiful. You need to moderate those so you can stay on track, because this is something that's quite close to your heart, as far as I can tell, Rachel. Is that true?
Oh, like many topics in psychology. Yeah. It really is. Actually, one of the comments that we had earlier today on one of the preview post was a story of a follower whose friend had taken in a teenage girl. And I've had this, I'm thinking of so many clinical situations where my clients have maybe taken in a foster child or taken in someone else's teenage child to look after them because, they perceive them for that time, understandably, as a victim of difficult circumstances. They came in as the rescuer to protect them from a perpetrator. The perpetrator might be a parent. But then I've had clients who are foster carers, and then the perpetrator becomes the Department of Child Services because they're becoming very difficult to deal with. So it's interesting how these roles can sort of move around. And I think we see this drama triangle play out even in fairy tales. The one you and I briefly discussed was the Cinderella story, where Cinderella was the victim of her evil stepmother and evil stepsisters. So they were the perpetrators. She was the victim. And then the fairy godmother appeared as her rescuer. But hopefully, as I can't remember exactly, that fairy tale ends with Cinderella sort of getting out of her situation and finding her true power. I'm not into the nuance of the end of that story, but the way out is to find our true power rather than the power that comes from over-identifying with a role.
Okay, so it could be empowering to take on one of these roles temporarily.
Yeah.
I mean, to support someone, as you say, who's in a position to need support, is an empowering thing to do. What I'm hearing is it's the inability to take on the different positions, perhaps, that might get us stuck or rigid or tempted to use it as a source of power. In contrast to what real power is playing all the different roles, sometimes being the recipient of support.
I think that's a really useful first step. It may not always be the first step, but a useful first step can be to put yourself in the positions of the others, because all of us have probably had some experience of being all of these roles. And so that's empathy, taking the perspective of the other and imagining it from their position and imagining what they're feeling and what their needs are is very useful, because that's psychological flexibility. Getting stuck in one perspective and one position is rigidity, and what we're after here is flexibility. And I think our true power comes from, what you and I kind of talk about almost every live stream, is knowing what needs are being met or not being met or supported in the situation, finding words, finding language for those unmet needs and the feelings that are going on inside of us, and working with those, understanding those and expressing those in a gentle but assertive way to see if we can creatively problem solve and take action. And I guess the other bit there, the thing that gets in the way of, one of the things that gets in the way, lack of skill gets in the way sometimes, but also for me, I have the skills and I still get stuck sometimes. And I think that's because of fear. So there's a fear in giving up your role. If you see yourself as a victim, it's worth asking yourself, what's scary to me about taking action and stepping out of the victim role? If you're a rescuer, there might be some equally scary, thoughts that you're having about what you're giving up or what you're risking if you're brave enough to, let the other person manage their own life. The fear for the rescuer is, if I stop rescuing this person, what's going to happen to them? We get very scared for them. And so it's a fine line that we have to walk sometimes.
And the fear of loss of identity sounds like it's the strongest aspect. If I'm strongly identified with a particular role, then I'm questioning who I am without that role.
Yeah.
What would you say for the perpetrator? What kind of questions might someone ask if they find themselves being overly critical? I'm thinking of clients who I know sometimes find criticism of others stands in the way of connection and openness and being willing to be vulnerable, because if I'm criticizing someone else, I'm kind of stuck in that perpetrator role.
Yeah.
How might you facilitate or inquire, how might they inquire of themselves?
Mm.
What to do to shift beyond that identity.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of our defenses. Judging others is a defense, because then I get to feel right, and nobody likes to think that they are wrong. That's a very humble position. But I guess we do want to find some humility. We want to find the place inside of ourselves that, first of all, we need to breathe and self-soothe and take time out and, maybe get some support to figure out what we're really feeling and needing underneath our judgment and anger. And, find a more direct, honest way to communicate what our needs are. And try and hold the other person with empathy, even if they're behaving in a way that we don't understand or that's deeply hurtful. There's real value in softening into our hurt and understanding and making sense of our anger. Because the thing about judgment, although it's so tempting and it's so human and automatic, my mind still judges when I feel hurt and angry. But we don't want to stay in judgment, because judgment doesn't take me anywhere. If I judge someone as inconsiderate, manipulative, lazy, selfish, or something else, of course, my mind will do that sometimes. But if I stay there, I don't go anywhere else. I don't take appropriate action. And I actually stay, this is the paradoxical thing. If I stay in the perpetrator role of being hypercritical, I also feel like a victim at the same time. And so I don't empower myself.
Wow.
So
okay. That's quite fascinating that you're noticing a number of those roles playing out at once. Yeah. And so the suggestion would be, if someone's noticing that they're critical, to ask themselves, what's scary for me about softening? What's scary for me about being vulnerable? I really like that you offer questions. And before we go on, because there's obviously so much to cover on this topic, there's some really interesting comments coming up. Stephanie is saying, if I'm not my mum's rescuer, if I'm not rescuing her, then she turns into the perpetrator. So rather than the mother playing the victim, so it sounds like they're stuck in some kind of pattern. But if she doesn't hold that pattern, then the mother becomes the perpetrator.
Yeah. Well, if people haven't already opened a tab with that blog post, I'm looking at under my 10 tips for breaking out of the triangle. Number 4 says, if you find yourself taking on too much responsibility for other people's feelings, back off. And it sounds like that's what Stephanie has tried to do. And of course, nothing is without consequence. Sometimes we need to make it explicit. We need to soften and say, I have been holding myself responsible for your happiness, Mum, or for your feelings. And I don't think that's good for me or you. And so maybe making it explicit that, I'm here to listen. I'll be with you in it, but I can't fix it. And I've actually said that to people in my personal life. I will be with you with you in this. I can't fix it for you, but I'm here. I'll be with you in it. That's the adult position. That's the healthy adult position that breaks us out of the drama triangle.
That sounds like what Jo's saying in her comments around that it's likely to be playing out, but it's the extremes that cause the major issues. Thank you for that comment, Jo. Really, really helpful. Others are saying that they try to stay out of the drama altogether. Any thoughts on that, Rachel?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, why go into the boxing ring if you don't have to? Strategic or tactical avoidance is a really good strategy sometimes. I think it's very wise. If you're able to stand back and maybe let the person who you care about most let them know that you love them, that you're there for them. But definitely, there's a term in psychology which some people will know, triangulation. And very often when we talk about triangulation, it's this dynamic. And so, I'm regularly advising my clients to be careful of triangulation, of stepping into one of these roles, which, as I mentioned, can actually shift moment to moment. and letting people have independent relationships with one another. You know, if it's a boss and two employees, if you're the kind of potential rescuer for your colleague, remind yourself that your boss and your colleague need to have a relationship that's independent from you, and you need to have a relationship that's independent with each of them from the other, and trying to keep that direct relationship and not get involved, not triangulate, is easy enough to do if you're aware of what's going on. If you feel yourself getting hooked, then you can, you know, breathe, keep awareness, keep conscious, and stay out of it.
So are you saying that binary relationships tend to be easier? And can we always rely on binary relationships? I mean, fundamentally, relationships are one-on-one. Even when we're in a group, right, we still have an independent, as you say, independent relationship with each person, which certainly seems to simplify things, right?
Yeah.
Triangles just inevitably get difficult, the third wheel, right? I've never felt comfortable in triangles, I'll be honest. I feel immediately uncomfortable. I mean, it's not always the case, but certainly in my family, I'm one of 4 kids, and it could quite easily become talking about, unless, I mean, I've heard myself say, would you please go to the horse's mouth, like ask me directly. I would so much rather that than a she said. Inevitably, it's complicated. Is it possible to only have binary relationships, or to see them in that light?
I mean, it's possible to aim for that. I think it's a worthwhile goal. I think in some instances we've absolutely got nobody to blame except for ourselves sometimes when we get caught up in a drama and we look back and we think, oh my goodness, I wish I would have stood back from that. Other times it's very complicated, because it could be, and this is common, the other parent and a child. You know, this is very common in the couples that I see, where one partner says, I don't like how he or she treats our child. Immediately you've got a triangle, and it's almost inevitable. You know, so for me, helping that family, it's a matter of helping each person elucidate their unmet needs, talk about their feelings, and then they step back from the role that they're stuck in of rescuer, perpetrator, or victim. And then I guess, like so many situations, the first step is empathy. You know, hearing each other's fears, hearing each other's disappointments, hearing each other's frustrations. And then once we're clear on each person's underlying dynamics, then we can take action based on that. And the roles just kind of disappear. Now we're just 3 humans or more trying to problem solve a situation, which is sometimes really complicated. Like in the case of the family who took in the teenager lest she or he be homeless. It's really, really hard. And this is where I step in sometimes as a therapist or a mediator. And even in myself, I notice when I first became a mediator, I noticed I'd sit with 2 people in a room to facilitate conflict management. And my mind would start to create a victim and a perpetrator. You know, I had to become really conscious not to take somebody's side more than the other side. And even now, I have to work really hard to dive underneath my thinking, my automatic judging mind, and try and sense what emotional feelings and what needs each of these people are, you know, experiencing, so that we have that conversation. That's a much better conversation.
I'm interested in how you would facilitate, and not necessarily in a mediation position, but how you would encourage someone to facilitate really their own inquiry around their own feelings and their own needs if they start to see that they've taken on one of these roles. And what I'm hearing is that it's quite an insidious dynamic, right? That it creeps in, and before you've realized, you've found yourself taking on a victim mentality. So that would be the point, obviously, to inquire. And I know that non-violent communication is one of our shared practices, and there are some listeners also from our NVC community. So I'd love to hear how you would encourage someone to discover their own feelings and their own needs when they can see that they're in one of these positions. And perhaps we could even do it for each of those positions.
Yeah. And people listening could think about their own situation, which I asked them to sort of mentally bring with them.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes I would make it really explicit. So I might not use the language of perpetrator and victim. It's very strong language. And I think Dr. Cartman, who came up with it, worked a lot with abusive and domestic violence type situations, which is extreme. And we actually do have sometimes a perpetrator. That's strong language, though, for the situations that most of us are experiencing day to day. So I might say something like, I can see you, or say I was in it, I can see we've assumed different roles here. I'm the one being critical of you, you're feeling criticized or victimized by me. Sometimes we're taking turns doing that, and I might say, I see that it's not working. It's not going anywhere. I wonder if we could break out of that. Wonder if we could slow down and really look at this together and try and be curious rather than critical. Try and bypass the judgments and the criticisms by actually just stating how we feel. And this is where a list of feelings comes in handy, because words like attacked, manipulated, abused, and victimized aren't exactly feeling words. But if we say things like, I'm scared, I'm disappointed, I'm angry, I'm hurt, sometimes we're more able to empathize with those feelings, with those words, and then we can slow down and soften, try and stay curious. I can't say enough about curiosity as an antidote for being stuck in a role. Because in the slower, more softened, more curious state, if we can get ourselves into that state, other stuff will come up. Stuff from our unconscious will come up and will tell us, you're scared. And this is like, it's the observing mind, the ability to step back from our own mind and just see what it's doing and understand why, that some really strong feelings and some really core unmet needs going on there. So I would actually have an explicit conversation with people about what's underneath, about the roles we're playing and what's underneath, and let's break out of them.
Okay, so slowing down enough to connect with the genuine feeling that might be underlying perhaps defenses or protective mechanisms. When you speak, you always remind me that the body is really an essential part of the process. Even though, we're talking about psychology, it's really the body lives, or the mind lives in the body rather. And whenever you talk about feelings, it reminds me that we need to be in contact with our sensation to some extent in order to really connect with what's underlying.
Yeah.
How important do you think on that sensory literacy is? That's part A. And how important is emotional literacy? To have language around our feelings and our needs. This comes up a lot for me in my professional and my personal life. How important is it that someone has access to the words to describe their experience? Is it necessary, or can they just have the experience and honor that, and that's sufficient?
Well, yeah, it's such a big question that you're asking, and it's so great. I mean, I used to be very dependent on my list of feelings and needs, and I still use them a lot because I think they simplify so much. And I've heard people really have fantastic dialogues of mutuality where this is the problem with the drama triangle. There's a lack of mutuality. There's a lack of people sharing power. Everyone's grabbing power in different ways. And in mutuality, we really want to kind of take turns and share the personal power around. And so having lists of feelings and needs can really help. And I've seen people have beautiful healing and restorative dialogues using metaphor, using analogy, anything, I suppose, that comes from our heart and maybe touches somebody else's heart in some way and gives them cognitive clarity, a language-based way to understand what it might be like for the other person, as well as what it's like for myself. So, I think the feelings and needs list, which we can post in the comments for anybody who's not come across them before,
yeah, for sure,
are a really great start and a very essential basic tool. But I just want to kind of be flexible as well and say it's not the only way. But whatever we do, we want to bypass attacks, judgment, blame, or imposing our interpretation on the other person. Now, of course, we have interpretations, but like Brene Brown says, preface it with, I'm telling myself, or I'm making this mean, or the way I'm interpreting this is, because then it opens up the possibility for the other person to say, wow, that is not how I see it at all. Okay, good. We can stay curious. We can stay kind of connected through trying to understand each other's minds as well as each other's emotional and physical experience of this. There's so much. And if you have no skill around it and all you've got are the teachings from your family of origin, which may have been quite dysfunctional, and from this culture, which has a lot of dysfunctional aspects to it, then you probably feel powerless because you don't know what else to do. And it's not your fault if you don't know what else to do. But I just want to remind people, you can learn. There's lots of resources out there so that you can learn other ways.
Yes, I would have to agree. I found nothing more empowering than having a list of words that describe how I feel and what I need. So that brings us to the next inquiry around needs, and perhaps we could even do a compassionate guessing for each of the positions. What is it that the rescuer would be needing?
Well, actually, I noticed in somebody's comments, I think it was Kirsten's, that, something about connection, the parental figure. I mean, so often in families, we're looking for connection, and connection's a fairly broad word, but that might mean a feeling of being understood, being seen, being known, being heard. So often
for the rescuer, a sense of competence that I have a place, I have a position, even recognition. I've seen that need for recognition drive that. It's almost a false sense of being needed, which forces someone else into a victim role. Well, unless they have the skills to avoid it.
No, I agree with you. I think often the rescuer is looking for a sense of appreciation and acknowledgement and a sense of their own competence. And they're all beautiful human needs. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we may stay stuck in a bit of a rescuer or a bit of a victim mode, but as long as we can say, I see what I'm doing here and this is what I'm looking for, and I know that what I'm doing is going part way towards that, but ultimately maybe it's not really satisfying, because I believe deep down we're all looking for mutually satisfying relationships where I can be myself and you can be yourself, and conflict's going to come up, but we can talk about our needs. So I think the need of the victim is to be seen and to have compassion, to be understood. The rescuer, yes, competence, appreciation, acknowledgement. And I think the role of the perpetrator is similar to the role of the victim sometimes.
Okay, go on.
To be seen, to be heard, to be loved. I once had this client who'd got out of jail for punching somebody in the face, his best mate. And I taught him NVC, and then he said, if I knew this back then, I wouldn't have punched my friend and I wouldn't have ended up in jail if I knew that all I wanted was to be heard and understood.
Yes.
And he didn't know that. So he ended up expressing his unmet need in this very tragic way, became the perpetrator, ended up in prison.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm also getting the need for vulnerability for the perpetrator. I'm thinking about some people that I know who are kind of stuck in a critical mindset, and there seems to be a lack of willingness to soften, to be needy, to be receptive, even to be, I guess, in the more feminine qualities of being cared for. The perpetrator, as far as I can see, would be needing vulnerability.
Well, they'd be needing to build their capacity for vulnerability if they wanted to get out of that role. And I think in my blog post, let me just go back to that. It says in in the tip number, let me see. I'm looking, I really like some of the tips. I wrote this a few years ago, and when I reread it, I thought that's a pretty good blog post, actually.
It's a great post. I love it. I love that you can honor yourself.
So yes, I was talking about fear, obligation, and guilt, the fog of the drama. So if you're feeling fear, obligation, and guilt, you may be in the victim role. But if you want the other person to be fearful or feel obligated to you, then maybe you are in the perpetrator manipulator role, and then you need to find a way to get back into your integrity, to be more direct, more honest, and maybe you need some help and support about getting clearer on your needs and communicating them more effectively.
There are some really good comments.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I did miss the last thing that you said, but I can highly recommend your blog post. It is smashing. And there's not that much written out there that I've come across on the triangulation and the drama triangle. So yeah, beautiful job on putting that together. Kirsten has asked, could the perpetrator be an event or a situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are the roles we make in our mind, you know, so as soon as we see ourselves as a victim in some way, and we've all done that, by the way, there's no shame in that, then there must be a perpetrator. For me to feel like a victim, there must be some object out there at which I'm directing my blame and my anger. It could be COVID. You could see COVID as the perpetrator.
The government.
The government, yeah, or it could just be another person. So these are archetypes, so they're not fixed, you know, they sort of land in you mentally and emotionally. And then I think I saw another comment in there, or question, you know, can we switch between maybe being the victim and the rescuer? Absolutely. You know, these can kind of land in our psyche, you know, at different times, and perhaps even be a bit of a hybrid. We can toggle between one and the other, and just having words for them, just having a bit of language. If you can handle the emotive nature of this language, it's useful because you can step back. With language, you can step back and see, you can observe what's happening through a framework. Now, it might not be a perfect framework or the best framework. It's similar to another framework that I haven't posted about recently, but it's, people might have heard of transactional analysis, where the three roles we play are the parent, adult, and child. The child would be analogous to the victim. The critical parent would be analogous to the perpetrator, being critical and overbearing. And then the adult is our healthy adult mode in schema therapy, where we step back, we stay as calm as we possibly can, and then we try and understand the needs in the situation and solve or manage the problem from that adult perspective.
Are you suggesting that we have, that we can take on these roles within ourselves and almost see a situation from different perspectives? That's golden.
Yeah, see it from different perspectives, see what part we're playing in it, and then, yeah, step outside of it, even just a little bit. You know, I always say to people, just as much as you can, do the best you can to step outside of it. And you may get sucked back into it, but then don't give up, step back outside of it again. And then you might get sucked back in, and then, you know, and people might be in these situations for months or years, and that may be unavoidable. And if the best you can do is kind of get hooked, but then step back from it, and then get hooked again, but then step back from it, you're doing better than the person who stays hooked the entire time.
Yeah, awareness. Awareness is key.
Yeah. Are there any questions, or there's so many comments I can see?
Oh yeah, there's lots of viewers today. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Yeah, it sounds like everyone can relate in some way.
Joe asked if accountability plays a big part here, and walking away. If walking away is an option, temporarily or permanently, it's often a very wise option, especially if you can walk away and tactically avoid the situation and then reflect, did I play a part in this? And if so, what was that? Even if it was through my non-reaction, my non-action. You know, maybe when I mediate workplace conflicts, sometimes someone really is embodying the victim and they will just say, I didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I help them to see that they also didn't respond when they, you know, wish they would have or could have. And so in future, you know, they say in future, if that happened again, I would take action. And so, yeah, definitely walking away if possible, but then don't stay bitter or feeling like a victim. Reflect, reflect, reflect.
And
So you
that's
can
a lovely
learn.
segue to Sarah's comment on that we might be able to identify the need underlying one of these roles, but we might not know how to meet the need. That's of course the final step of NVC, the request or the strategy. It's an interesting comment, Sarah. What are your thoughts, Rachel?
Look, I relate to that. I mean, sometimes I have contemplated for a long time my strategies or my kind of best actions. And I sympathize, you know, it's really unclear sometimes what the best course of action is. And sometimes we make a decision and it's hard to stick to because, you know, other feelings come up. Sometimes we really need to talk it through with a therapist or a trusted friend, you know. Sometimes it's clear, you know, I need to quit my job and apply for another job. Sometimes that's just it's a scary and courageous decision, but it's clear. In families and friendships, it can be less clear. And I wish I could give you some magic answer every time, but often.
Yeah, if you've also taught me, Rachel, that if if a strategy or a request is not coming, it may be that I'm not ready for it. You know, you've taught me that we're inclined to jump to the strategy too quickly. Oh, I'm irritable because I need to go for a run. I mean, that may be the case, but to sit with the need for longer, to sit with the need and to inquire, well, what's the need underlying this need, and what's the possible need underlying this need, that to spend more time in that space usually allows for the request to be brought forth. That's been my experience. It's not like I'm grasping or searching for the need for the strategy or the request.
That's right, with a feeling of desperation. And then if we act out of that sort of little bit of desperation, you know, it may not be realistic or it may not work. For myself, and I don't always do this, but I have been lately, I meditate every day because in that meditational state, things settle and it gives an opportunity. It doesn't happen every time, but it can happen that I create the conditions inside myself for some new realization to appear. And that new realization may not be a solution, but as the Jungian psychologists say, maybe I just need to get bigger than my problems. Maybe my problems can't be solved, but I can grow bigger than them. And no discussion on you know, these kind of dilemmas would be complete without mentioning grief, because sometimes I need to do a lot of grief work. Sometimes you may need to grieve the loss of a dream, something you wished could have been, like it could be a job or a relationship, and it just didn't turn out and won't turn out the way you dreamed of. That is a genuine grief. And until you allow yourself a grieving process, and you can never say exactly how long that's going to take, that mourning process will then reveal you know, new insights, and a new possibility may emerge out of your grief. I know that sounds esoteric, but that's my experience. So we need to trust our unconscious processes sometimes as well.
Yeah, so the feeling, spending time in the feeling, spending time in the needs, allowing space for that so that I might be bigger than it, allowing the conditions to sit with it, compassionately embracing it. That's what you've taught me, Rachel, that sitting with the feelings and sitting with the needs, really the rest takes care of itself. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and seeking support. You know, human beings need each other. And so even if you've got one person in your life who you really trust to hold space for you or to not judge you, to accept you, you know, all the good, the bad, and the ugly, then that's a precious person in your life who may be able to support you, hopefully not try and rescue you, but support you to get clearer on, what it is that you really want in this situation and what possibilities may be available to you.
There are some comments around fear. Part of me wants to walk away, but the victim is scared. Yeah.
Absolutely. So much of breaking out of the drama is looking into our fears and holding them gently, not beating up on ourselves for having fears, but to really wonder about, how realistic are my fears? Am I afraid that I'll be all alone, or that life will be bleak and boring if I'm no longer in this drama? Yeah, there's so much we could say about that, but I think that's a really good discussion a really good question to journal about and talk with a trusted friend or therapist about. Really dive into that question of, what is the fear? What am I afraid of? Because so often our fears are like boogeymen. They're not real, but they're still valid and legitimate in that they're in you, and they're really worth investigating. And being brave, being courageous, which is such a vulnerable thing to do, and taking small steps towards the bigger goal of breaking out of the drama. It takes a lot of courage.
It does. It really does. And structures also come to mind. Things that make it easier for us to break free of fear. Like you say, knowing who holds those safe, reliable, secure connections, so that I've got support and structures around me, that I might break a mold, or I might break a pattern that I'm stuck in, especially some long-standing ones. And fear is so strong, and in a way it's a protective mechanism, so to honor that fear is essential. And yet if we're stuck and we know that it's not for our highest well-being, then I would encourage this listener to put in place structures that enable that to happen.
I agree with you completely. And making a plan or planning a process, even if it doesn't go to plan, because a plan helps us feel contained. It contains that anxiety and fear. So make a plan, be open to changing the plan, but then you can say, I've got a plan. I don't know about you, but I often feel better if I know I've got a plan.
Absolutely. And it's empowering, as opposed to feeling I'm at the whim of the situation, even if I have a plan. And like you say, even if it changes, at least I've got the reins, rather than being at the whim.
That's right, because it sends a message back to yourself of, I can do something here. I'm not powerless to act. And that's essential.
I am aware that our time is coming.
Yes.
There is one final question from Teresa. They keep coming through. Teresa says, how would I know if I'm letting my grief play out and trusting the timing versus being stuck? So trusting the timing versus being stuck. How long to sit with the grief?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because it's easy to sometimes confuse grief or mourning with self-pity or victimhood. I've got a really great blog post on that too. I might share it in the comments. The difference between self-compassion and self-pity. Look, I think even if you're in a protracted situation, it's always like every day, even if the situation is complicated and it's not going to be fixed by next week, every day remind yourself, I'm not powerless to act here. Even if I'm in my grief, what is one step I can take, one easy step to look after myself? And it might be a series of 100 tiny little steps that are, you just looking after yourself. Because grieving is you looking after yourself. It's not feeling sorry for yourself. Having compassion for yourself should be empowering, not disempowering. And so without knowing the context, I probably can't give really specific advice or thoughts there.
But you're right. I'm hearing that if I need to grieve, I feel a sense of empowerment. If I don't need to keep grieving and I'm stuck there will also be a sense of disempowerment. That sense of whether I'm in control or not can can be an identifying feature of whether to stay or to shift.
I agree with that. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Grieving and tears and crying is a natural antidepressant. If you haven't let your mind go into self-pity while you've been grieving or crying, but you've just been feeling for yourself, on the other side, you are likely to be feeling tired, but a sense of, okay, I can do something about this.
Mm-hmm. And that is a lovely place to end. Anissa and Joe have both kind of reiterated the process of empowerment, and that is certainly what the triangle has provided me, even in the short space of time that I've been aware of it. And I love that you've reminded us that the positions are not necessarily bad. We're not to shame ourselves for playing a victim in some roles, for sometimes being the perpetrator, and for sometimes wanting to rescue, but it gives us a framework, a visual concept to work with, and it helps our emotional and psychological literacy.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that. That was so dear to my heart today on this topic, that we do not judge or shame ourselves for finding ourselves, having landed in one of these roles. This happens to everybody. And these things kind of take us over, hopefully for, not forever. And we can, instead of, being the role, we can see, oh yes, I've slipped into it, but now I can slip out of it.
And yes, we can slip in and out. And it is also a reminder of something that you and I discussed over our walk, that conflict is not always a bad thing. And you, I think, you referenced Pema Chodron, who's a shared role model of ours.
Yes.
That conflict is necessary. Would you close on that quote?
I'll close with that little story, because we've gone so over time, but it's clearly such an interesting topic for people. And for us, Pema Chodron she's a Buddhist nun who started some schools in India. She has a book, A Cave in the Snow.
And When Things Fall Apart.
And When Things Fall Apart. Yeah, that's a great book too. And she was interviewed, and I heard her say that when she was in the cave having contemplative times, living very austere life of solitude, that it was great. But, she didn't grow and learn as a person, because she wasn't having any conflict with anybody. When she came down from the mountain and tried to start schools, there was plenty of conflict and plenty of opportunities for her to practice all of her principles of compassion and wisdom. And so other people give us something to chafe up against, to kind of butt up against. And this is how we grow, and this is how we become resilient, and this is how we get stronger. The same way you lift weights at the gym. Look at my biceps. Lift weights at the gym to, we need the resistance. We need something to lean into or up against in order to grow. And so she was saying, in the cave, she didn't really grow in the way that human relationships help us grow. It was really interesting hearing her say that. The end.
Dr. Rachel, thank you for all of your time and energy. I realize you give up your Sunday afternoon for us, but I always take away a fullness from our experiences. So thank you. This is education for me. This is empowerment, and I'm sure it is, or I hope it is, equally for our listeners.
I hope so too. I love doing it. Now, before we sign off, do you want to mention our retreat?
Definitely. Okay, so March 8th to 10th. We only offer 2 retreats a year, so we urge you to take up this opportunity. It is filling up, so please act quickly. We come over here to Stradbroke Island, and you'll be learning a lot of the skills that we talk about here. We do primarily a focus on nonviolent communication, which is a practice we use intrapersonally and interpersonally. And we also ground that with breath and with movement. It's all plant-based nutrition. We have a stunning waterfront location, and it's a small group, so you are ensured confidentiality. And Rachel and myself are both trauma-informed. Anyone else that we bring in is also trauma-informed.
Yeah.
So it's really important, the safety.
And we love it because of the community as well, yeah?
Yes, yes. And I will post a link to our community, our Facebook page. So join that one, because we will let you know we've got plenty of events coming up, as well as the retreat. But the most important thing about the retreat is that we're offering 20% off until 9 p.m. tonight. And after that, the best we can offer is 10% as and that. So please just make the most of it. It's a really good deal. And get your bookings in this evening if possible. And we would obviously love to see you all there.
We would indeed. Okay, I'm going to share all those links below that I promised to share. And we'll be back next Sunday at 5.
Gorgeous. Look forward to it.
Okay, enjoy Stratty.
Thank you. Enjoy your Sunday. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Alexis. Bye, everyone.